The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store in Weaverville, California, and Lydia Danforth stumbled out with nothing but the tattered dress on her back and bruises painting her skin in shades of purple and yellow that told stories she refused to speak aloud. It was the summer of 1876, and the small mining town nestled in the Trinity Mountains had seen its share of broken souls seeking refuge from their pasts. But when Lydia stepped onto the dusty street, her green eyes darted around like a cornered animal, taking in every shadow and movement with visceral fear that made the stagecoach driver himself pause in concern. "Miss, you got someone meeting you here?" he asked, his weathered face creasing with worry. Lydia shook her head, her auburn hair falling loose from its pins. "No, sir. I just needed to go as far as the money would take me." The driver scratched his beard, glancing around the quiet street. "Well, you might try the boarding house down the way. Mrs. Chen runs a respectable place." Before Lydia could respond, a tall figure approached from across the street. Lucas Walker stood 6 feet 2 inches, with sun-bronzed skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. At 26 years old, he owned one of the larger cattle ranches outside of town, and he came into Weaverville every Saturday for supplies. Something in the young woman's posture, the way she seemed ready to bolt at any moment, stopped him in his tracks. "Everything all right here, Henry?" Lucas asked the driver, though his gray eyes remained on Lydia. This young lady just arrived, was telling her about Mrs. Chen's place. Lydia's hands trembled as she clutched a small cloth bag, her only possession. She took an involuntary step backward when Lucas moved closer, and he immediately stopped, raising his hand slightly in a gesture of peace. "I mean you no harm, miss," he said gently. "I'm Lucas Walker. I own the Double W Ranch about 5 miles north of here." She studied him warily, taking in his open expression and the kindness in his eyes. There was no cruelty there, no hint of the violence she had fled from back in Missouri. Still, trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Lydia Danforth," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas noticed the way she favored her left side, the yellowing bruise peeking out from beneath her sleeve. His jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral, instinctively knowing that pity would only make her retreat further. "Mrs. Chen's boarding house is a good option," he said, keeping his distance. "But if you are looking for work, I could use help at the ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, has been asking for an assistant. The work is honest, the pay is fair, and you would have your own room in the main house." Lydia's eyes widened. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" "Because everyone deserves a chance to start over," Lucas replied simply. "And because I can see you need one." The words hit Lydia like a physical thing, and tears suddenly blurred her vision. She blinked them back furiously, unwilling to show more weakness. "I do not know anything about ranching. Mrs. Patterson would teach you household duties, cooking, cleaning, mending, nothing you could not learn." Lucas glanced at the darkening sky. "Storm is coming in." "At least let me take you out to meet her. If you decide it is not for you, I will bring you back to town tomorrow. No obligations." Every instinct screamed at Lydia to refuse, to keep running. But she was exhausted, bone-deep tired from weeks of travel and months of living in fear. Something in Lucas's steady gaze made her want to believe that not all men were monsters. "All right," she said finally. "I will meet her." Lucas smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and somehow safer. "My wagon is just over there. Let me grab my supplies, and we will head out." The ride to the Double W Ranch took nearly an hour, and Lydia spent most of it in silence, watching the landscape change from the dusty town to rolling hills dotted with cattle. Lucas did not press her with questions, seemingly content to let the silence stretch between them. He pointed out landmarks occasionally, his voice low and soothing. "That creek there never runs dry, even in the worst summers," he said, gesturing to a ribbon of water cutting through the valley. "And those mountains to the east, that is where the old mining camps used to be. Most of them are abandoned now, but you can still see folks panning for gold on Sundays." Lydia found herself relaxing incrementally, lulled by the rhythm of the wagon and Lucas's gentle commentary. The land here was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that felt like freedom after the suffocating confines of her previous life. The ranch house came into view as they crested a hill, a sprawling two-story structure built from timber and stone. Corrals and outbuildings spread out around it, and Lydia could see several ranch hands working with horses in the distance. It was larger and more prosperous than she had expected. "My father built this place from nothing," Lucas said, noting her surprised expression. "Started with 50 head of cattle and a dream. When he passed 3 years ago, he left it to me and my sister, Clara. She is married now, lives in Sacramento with her husband." A plump woman in her 50s emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. Her round face broke into a smile when she saw Lucas. "About time you got back. I was starting to think you had gotten lost in town," she called out, then noticed Lydia. Her expression shifted to one of warm curiosity. "And who is this you have brought home?" Lucas helped Lydia down from the wagon, careful not to touch her more than necessary. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Lydia Danforth. I thought she might be the helper you have been requesting." Mrs. Patterson's sharp eyes took in Lydia's condition in an instant. The bruises, the haunted look, the way she held herself like she expected a blow at any moment. The older woman's expression softened immediately. "Well, child, you look like you could use a hot meal and a good night's rest before we talk about work," she said briskly. "Come inside. Lucas, bring her bag, will you?" The interior of the house was warm and welcoming, with handmade furniture and curtains that let in the golden afternoon light. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, and Lydia's stomach growled audibly, reminding her that she had not eaten since the previous day. Mrs. Patterson led her to a chair at the large kitchen table. "Sit yourself down. I have got stew on the stove and there is plenty to go around." Lydia sat gingerly, still not quite believing this was real. Lucas brought in her meager bag and set it by the door, then excused himself to tend to the horses, giving the women space. As soon as he was gone, Mrs. Patterson ladled out a generous bowl of stew and set it in front of Lydia along with a thick slice of bread. "Eat, child. We can talk after you have got some food in you." Lydia ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger as her body remembered what it was like to have proper nourishment. Mrs. Patterson busied herself around the kitchen, giving Lydia privacy while keeping a motherly eye on her. When the bowl was finally empty, Lydia felt tears prickling at her eyes again. "Thank you," she whispered. "You do not even know me and you are being so kind." Mrs. Patterson sat down across from her, her expression gentle but direct. "I know enough. I know you are running from something or someone. I know you have been hurt. And I know that Lucas brought you here because he has got a good heart and cannot stand to see someone suffering." She reached across the table and patted Lydia's hand. "What I need to know is if you are willing to work hard and start fresh." "I am," Lydia said with more conviction than she had felt in months. "I want nothing more than to leave my past behind." "Then you have got a place here as long as you need it," Mrs. Patterson declared. "The work is not difficult, just steady. Cooking, cleaning, mending, helping with the garden. Lucas pays fair wages and you will have your own room upstairs. Meals are included, of course." Lydia could barely process the generosity being offered to her. "I do not understand why he would do this for me. Mrs. Patterson stood and began clearing the dishes. Lucas lost his mother when he was just a boy. His father was a good man but did not know how to raise children alone. Lucas grew up watching his father struggle, watching his little sister cry for a mother who was not there. It made him protective of those who are hurting. She paused, looking at Lydia with knowing eyes. He will not pry into your business, and neither will I. But if you ever need to talk, my door is always open. That night, Lydia lay in a real bed for the first time in weeks, clean from a hot bath and wearing a borrowed nightgown that smelled of lavender. The room was simple but comfortable, with a window that overlooked the valley. She could hear the distant lowing of cattle and the chirp of crickets, sounds that were foreign but somehow comforting. For the first time since fleeing Missouri, Lydia allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could build a new life here. The next morning, Lydia woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee wafting up from the kitchen. She dressed quickly in one of the simple dresses Mrs. Patterson had left for her, noting with relief that it fit reasonably well. The older woman had also provided undergarments and a sturdy pair of boots, necessities Lydia had been doing without. When she descended the stairs, she found Mrs. Patterson already hard at work preparing breakfast. Lucas sat at the table with two ranch hands, discussing the day's work. "Morning, Lydia," Mrs. Patterson greeted her cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in a long time," Lydia admitted, acutely aware of Lucas's eyes on her. She kept her gaze down, focusing on the task at hand. "What can I do to help?" "You can start by setting out plates for breakfast. We feed the hands who live on the property, so count for 7 this morning." Lydia moved carefully around the kitchen, learning where things were kept. The two ranch hands, Miguel and Thomas, nodded politely to her but did not pry, which she appreciated. Lucas watched her quietly, noting how she kept herself positioned so that her back was never to the door, how she flinched slightly at sudden movements. Over the following days, Lydia fell into a routine. She worked alongside Mrs. Patterson, learning the rhythms of the household. The older woman was patient and kind, never pushing Lydia beyond her comfort zone. Lucas kept his distance, though Lydia often felt his gaze on her, not invasive but concerned, like he was making sure she was settling in all right. 2 weeks after her arrival, Lydia was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard raised voices from the barn. Her entire body tensed, muscle memory flooding her with panic. Before she could stop herself, she was moving toward the house, seeking shelter. Lucas emerged from the barn with Thomas, both men laughing about something. When he spotted Lydia frozen halfway across the yard, her face pale and her hands trembling, his expression shifted immediately. "Lydia," he called gently, approaching slowly. "Are you all right?" She could not speak, could not explain that the sound of angry male voices transported her back to a place she was desperate to forget. Lucas stopped several feet away, his hands visible and non-threatening. "Thomas and I were just disagreeing about the best way to fix the fence line," he explained, his voice calm and steady. "We were not actually fighting, just being stubborn. I am sorry if we frightened you." Lydia's breathing slowly returned to normal. She felt foolish, overreacting to something so harmless. "I am sorry. I should not have assumed." "You have got nothing to apologize for," Lucas said firmly. He glanced back at Thomas, who had the good sense to make himself scarce. "Would you walk with me? There is something I would like to show you." Lydia hesitated, then nodded. Lucas led her away from the buildings, toward the creek that ran through the property. They walked in silence for several minutes before he spoke again. "When I was 12, my mother died giving birth to what would have been my younger brother," he began. "Neither of them survived. My father was devastated. He threw himself into work, barely spoke for months. Clara was only 8, and she needed someone to care for her to make her feel safe. Lydia listened, surprised by this glimpse into his past. "I did not know what I was doing," Lucas continued, "but I learned that sometimes people just need patience. They need someone who will not push them but will be there when they are ready." He turned to look at her directly. "I want you to know that you are safe here, Lydia. Whatever you are running from, whoever hurt you, they would have to go through me to reach you. And I promise you, I am not the kind of man who raises his voice or his hand to someone weaker." Tears streamed down Lydia's face before she could stop them. "He was my husband," she whispered, the words tumbling out before she could call them back. "We married when I was 19. He seemed so charming at first, so attentive, but after the wedding he changed. He became controlling, then cruel, then violent." Lucas's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. "You left him." "I waited until he was away on business, took what little money I had hidden and bought a ticket on the first stagecoach heading west. I do not even know if he is looking for me, but I am terrified he will find me." "What is his name?" "Richard Danforth. He owns a textile mill in St. Louis." Lucas was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. "That is a long way from here, and you are legally free from him." Lydia shook her head miserably. "Women cannot simply leave their husbands, you know that. In the eyes of the law, I am still his property." "Not in my eyes," Lucas said fiercely, "and not on my land. If he comes here, which I doubt he will after chasing you across half the country, he will find that California has different rules than Missouri, especially out here where the law is what we make it." The conviction in his voice made Lydia feel something she had not experienced in years: protected. Not possessed, not controlled, but genuinely protected by someone who expected nothing in return. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked, echoing her question from their first meeting. Lucas smiled slightly. "Because you deserve kindness, Lydia. And because I would like to think that if my sister ever needed help, someone would offer it to her without hesitation." They stood by the creek for a while longer, watching the water flow over smooth stones. When they returned to the house, Lydia felt lighter, as if sharing her secret had released some of the weight she had been carrying. As summer shifted toward autumn, Lydia began to heal in ways that went beyond the physical. The bruises faded from her skin, and she gained back the weight she had lost during her flight. But more importantly, the constant fear that had lived in her chest began to ease, replaced by a tentative sense of peace. She and Mrs. Patterson developed an easy rapport, working together to maintain the household. The older woman taught Lydia to bake bread the way Lucas liked it, how to preserve vegetables from the garden, and the best methods for removing stains from work clothes. It was simple, honest work, and Lydia found satisfaction in doing it well. Lucas remained respectful and distant, though Lydia caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she could not quite read. He never touched her without permission, never raised his voice, and always made sure she felt safe. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Lydia found herself looking forward to the meals they shared, to the rare moments when Lucas would tell stories about the ranch or his childhood. One evening in late September, a terrible storm rolled through the valley. Wind lashed the house, and rain pounded against the windows with frightening intensity. Lydia was helping Mrs. Patterson secure the shutters when a tremendous crack of thunder shook the entire structure. She cried out involuntarily, and suddenly Lucas was there, having come in from checking on the animals. "It is all right," he said over the roar of the storm. "The house has weathered worse than this." But another crash of thunder sent Lydia stumbling backward, her mind transporting her to a different storm, a different night, when Richard had locked her in the cellar as punishment for some imagined slight. She had spent hours in the darkness, listening to the storm rage overhead, convinced she would die down there. Lucas caught her arm gently, steadying her. "Lydia, what is wrong?" She was shaking, her breathing rapid and shallow. Lucas guided her to a chair, then knelt in front of her so they were at eye level. "Look at me," he said softly. "You are safe. You are here in my house and nothing is going to hurt you. Breathe with me slowly." He exaggerated his breathing, and Lydia found herself matching it in and out until the panic began to subside. Mrs. Patterson appeared with a glass of water, which Lydia accepted gratefully. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I do not know what came over me." "You do not need to apologize," Lucas said, still kneeling beside her. "Fear is not something you can control, especially when it is tied to bad memories." Lydia looked into his gray eyes and saw nothing but understanding and compassion. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his hand, the first time she had willingly initiated contact with him. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for giving me a place here, for being patient with me, for making me feel human again." Lucas turned his hand over, gently holding hers. "You have always been human, Lydia. You were just treated badly by someone who did not deserve you." The moment stretched between them, charged with something new and fragile. Then another boom of thunder broke the spell, and Lucas reluctantly released her hand. "I should check the barn again, make sure the roof is holding," he said, rising to his feet. "In this weather," Mrs. Patterson protested. "Lucas, you will be soaked through." "The animals need to be secure," he replied, already heading for his oilskin coat. He glanced back at Lydia. "Will you be all right?" She nodded, touched by his concern. "I will be fine. Please be careful." After he left, Mrs. Patterson settled into the chair beside Lydia. "He cares for you, you know, more than just as an employee." Lydia's heart stuttered. "I do not think that is wise. I am still married, technically, and I am too broken for someone like him." "You are healing," Mrs. Patterson corrected gently. "And Lucas is not the kind of man who sees people as broken or whole. He sees them as human beings worthy of love and respect." She patted Lydia's knee. "I am not saying you need to do anything about it. Just know that when you are ready, if you are ever ready, he would wait for you." Lydia pondered those words long after the storm had passed, and she was lying in her bed. The idea of being with another man, of trusting someone with her heart again, seemed impossible. And yet, when she thought of Lucas, she did not feel fear. She felt something warmer, something that terrified her in an entirely different way. October brought the cattle drive, a massive undertaking where Lucas and his men moved the herd to lower pastures for the winter. He would be gone for nearly 2 weeks, and Lydia was surprised by how much the thought bothered her. The morning he left, she stood on the porch with Mrs. Patterson, watching the organized chaos of men and animals preparing to move out. Lucas swung into his saddle with practiced ease, then rode over to say goodbye. "You are in charge while I am gone," he told Mrs. Patterson with a grin. "Try not to let the place fall apart." "I have been running household since before you were born, Lucas Walker," the older woman retorted. "You just focus on getting those cattle where they need to go." Lucas's gaze shifted to Lydia. "If you need anything, Miguel will be staying behind to handle things around the ranch. Do not hesitate to ask him for help." "We will be fine," Lydia assured him, though her voice sounded uncertain even to her own ears. Lucas hesitated, then reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small pistol. "I know you might not want this, but it would make me feel better if you kept it in the house. Just in case." Lydia accepted the weapon gingerly. "I have never fired a gun before. Miguel can show you how if you are willing to learn. I am not expecting trouble, but I believe in being prepared." His expression grew serious. "I will be back in 2 weeks. Take care of yourself, Lydia." "You too," she said softly. She watched him ride away until he was just a speck on the horizon, feeling an ache in her chest that she could not explain. The days without Lucas were strange. Lydia had not realized how much his presence had become a comforting constant until he was gone. She threw herself into work, helping Mrs. Patterson preserve the last of the garden harvest, mending clothes, and cleaning every corner of the house. Miguel proved to be a gentle teacher, showing Lydia how to handle the pistol safely. She was a quick learner, though she prayed she would never have to use it. On the 10th day of Lucas's absence, a stranger arrived at the ranch. Lydia was in the garden when she heard the horse approach, and her blood ran cold when she saw the well-dressed man dismounting by the house. He wore expensive Eastern clothes, completely out of place in the rural California landscape. Her hands began to shake. It could not be Richard. He could not have found her here. But as the man turned, Lydia saw it was not her husband. This man was shorter, with a thin mustache and calculating eyes. He spotted her and smiled in a way that made her skin crawl. "Good afternoon," he called out. "I am looking for Lucas Walker, Mrs." Patterson emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Walker is away on business. Can I help you with something?" The man's smile did not reach his eyes. "I am Detective Harold Simmons, hired to locate a missing woman, Lydia Danforth, wife of Richard Danforth of St. Louis." His gaze fixed on Lydia. "I believe I have found her." Lydia felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Mrs. Patterson stepped protectively in front of her. "I do not know who you are talking about," the older woman said firmly. "There is no one here by that name." "Come now," Simmons said, his voice dripping false charm. "Mrs. Danforth, your husband is very concerned about you. He has hired me to bring you home safely. He misses you terribly and is willing to forgive your little adventure." "I am not going anywhere with you," Lydia said, finding her voice though it shook. "And you are trespassing on private property." Simmons's expression hardened. "You are a married woman. You belong to your husband. Now, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but either way, you are coming back to St. Louis with me." Miguel appeared from the barn, a rifle held casually in his hands. "I think the lady said she is not interested in going with you. You should leave now." The detective's hand moved toward his coat, but Miguel raised the rifle slightly. "I would not do that if I were you. This is private land, and we have every right to defend it against threats." Simmons raised his hand slowly, his face flushing with anger. "This is not over. I will return with the local sheriff and a warrant. The law is on my side." "Then bring the law," Mrs. Patterson said calmly. "But until you have proper papers, you are not welcome here. Now leave, before we decide to have you arrested for trespassing and threatening a young woman." The detective mounted his horse, his eyes promising retribution. "You have not heard the last of this, Mrs. Danforth. Your husband pays well, and I always complete my jobs." After he rode away, Lydia collapsed onto the porch steps, her entire body shaking. Mrs. Patterson sat beside her, wrapping a comforting arm around her shoulders. "He found me," Lydia whispered. "After all this time, Richard found me." "One hired detective does not mean you are caught," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "And Lucas will be back in a few days. We will figure this out together." But Lydia knew the truth. Richard had the law on his side. She was legally his wife, and no amount of good intentions from Lucas or anyone else could change that. The brief freedom she had tasted was about to be snatched away. That night, Lydia barely slept. She kept seeing Richard's face in her mind, remembering the cold fury in his eyes when she displeased him, the casual violence of his hands. The thought of being dragged back to that life made her physically ill. By morning, she had made a decision. She would leave before Lucas returned, disappear into the mountains or another town, anywhere that Richard's detective could not find her. It was not fair to Lucas or Mrs. Patterson to bring this trouble to their doorstep. She was packing her meager belongings when Mrs. Patterson found her. "What do you think you are doing?" the older woman demanded. "I cannot stay here," Lydia said, tears streaming down her face. "That detective will come back, maybe with the sheriff, maybe with worse. I will not put you and Lucas in danger because of my problems." "Lydia Danforth, you sit down right now and listen to me," Mrs. Patterson said in a tone that brooked no argument. Lydia sat. "Running will not solve anything. That man will just keep searching, and next time you might not have people willing to protect you. We fight this together, do you understand? But what can we do? The law says I belong to Richard. The law also says you are entitled to safety and protection. If your husband was violent, there are ways to challenge his claim." Mrs. Patterson took Lydia's hands. "Lucas knows people, including a good lawyer in Sacramento. His brother-in-law has connections. We will find a way to fight this legally." Before Lydia could respond, they heard horses approaching at speed. Mrs. Patterson went to the window and her face broke into a relieved smile. "Lucas is back." Lydia's heart leaped even as dread filled her stomach. Lucas would be furious about the danger she had brought to his home. He would probably ask her to leave, and she could not blame him. But when Lucas burst through the door, his face was not angry. It was concerned and determined. "Miguel sent word," he said without preamble. "I rode back as fast as I could. Are you all right?" Lydia nodded mutely, overwhelmed by the fact that he had abandoned his cattle drive to rush back for her. Lucas crossed the room and for the first time pulled her into an embrace. Lydia stiffened initially, then slowly relaxed into his warmth, his strength, the steady beat of his heart under her ear. "I am not going to let him take you," Lucas said fiercely. "I do not care what the law says. You are under my protection, and I will move heaven and earth to keep you safe." Lydia pulled back to look up at him. "Lucas, you could get in serious trouble. Interfering with a husband's legal rights, harboring a runaway wife, these are crimes." "I do not care," he said simply. "Some laws are unjust, and this is one of them. No piece of paper gives a man the right to abuse his wife." Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. "I already suggested we contact your brother-in-law in Sacramento, see what legal options we have." Lucas nodded, though his arms remained around Lydia. "I will send a telegram today. Jonathan knows the best lawyers in the state. But in the meantime, we need to be prepared in case that detective returns." Over the next few days, the ranch became a fortress. Lucas stationed his most trusted men as lookouts, and everyone was armed and alert. He sent the telegram to his brother-in-law, and received a reply that a lawyer named Martin Blackwell would be arriving within the week to discuss Lydia's options. During this time, Lydia found herself drawn closer to Lucas. They spent long hours talking, sharing stories from their pasts, their hopes for the future. She learned about his dreams for the ranch, his desire to eventually start a horse breeding program. He listened as she spoke about the girl she had been before Richard, the dreams she had given up when she married him. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lucas took her hand. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "And I do not want you to feel pressured or obligated in any way." Lydia's heart began to race. "What is it?" "I have developed feelings for you, Lydia, deep feelings that go beyond friendship or simple protectiveness." He turned to face her, his gray eyes intense. "I think I am falling in love with you." Lydia's breath caught. She had suspected, had felt the pull between them growing stronger, but hearing him say it out loud made it real and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "Lucas, I do not know if I can be what you need," she whispered. "I am damaged. There are parts of me that might never fully heal." "You are not damaged," he said firmly. "You are a survivor. You are strong and brave and beautiful, and every day I spend with you makes me admire you more." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I am not asking you to love me back right now. I know you need time, maybe a lot of time. I just needed you to know how I feel." Tears spilled down Lydia's cheeks. "I am terrified of trusting someone again, of being vulnerable. I know. And I will wait as long as it takes for you to feel safe with me if you ever do." He wiped away her tears with his thumb. "But I want you to know that I would never hurt you, Lydia. Not intentionally, not ever. You are precious to me." Lydia leaned into his touch, letting herself absorb his warmth and sincerity. "I care for you too," she admitted softly. "More than I thought I could care for anyone after what I went through. You make me feel safe in a way I have never experienced before." Lucas smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "That is enough for now. More than enough." They sat together as darkness fell, Lydia's head resting on Lucas's shoulder, both of them finding comfort in the quiet companionship. The lawyer, Martin Blackwell, arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. He was a distinguished man in his 50s with sharp eyes and an air of competence. Lucas, Lydia, and Mrs. Patterson met with him in the study. "I have reviewed the information Lucas provided in his telegram," Blackwell began, pulling out papers from his case. "Unfortunately, California law, like most states, heavily favors husbands in marital disputes. However, there are some avenues we can explore." "Such as?" Lucas asked, his hand finding Lydia's under the table. "First, we can argue that Mr. Danforth's abuse constitutes a failure of his marital duties, which could be grounds for legal separation. However, this would require testimony about the abuse, possibly in front of a judge." Lydia paled at the thought of publicly recounting her experiences, but she nodded. "If that is what it takes." "The challenge is that without witnesses or medical documentation, it becomes your word against his. And unfortunately, judges tend to side with established businessmen over their wives." Blackwell's expression was sympathetic but realistic. "However, there is another option. If you could prove that he has abandoned his search or publicly renounced his claim to you, that could strengthen your position." "That detective seemed pretty determined," Mrs. Patterson pointed out. "I do not think Danforth is giving up. Which brings me to a more unconventional solution," Blackwell said carefully. "California has relatively progressive laws compared to many states. If Mrs. Danforth were to remarry here, to a California citizen, it would complicate any attempt to extradite her back to Missouri, particularly if that citizen were a man of standing in the community." The implication hung in the air. Lucas and Lydia exchanged glances. "You are suggesting a marriage of convenience," Lucas said slowly. "I am suggesting that a legal marriage to a respectable California rancher would provide Mrs. Danforth with a level of protection that her current status does not afford. Whether that marriage is one of convenience or genuine affection is between the two of you." Blackwell looked between them. "However, I should warn you that such an action would likely result in legal battles. Mr. Danforth could challenge the validity of the marriage, claim it was bigamous." "But it would buy us time," Lucas said. "Time to build a stronger case." "Potentially, yes." "And if the marriage were consummated and established as a genuine relationship, it would be much harder for Danforth to reclaim his wife, as California courts might view it as her having made a legal choice of residence and partnership." Lydia's mind was reeling. Marriage to Lucas. The thought filled her with equal parts terror and longing. Could she really bind herself to another man, even one as good as Lucas? "Can we have some time to discuss this privately?" Lucas asked. "Of course. I will be staying in Weaverville for the next few days. Send word when you are ready to talk further." After Blackwell left, Lydia and Lucas walked out to the creek, their usual spot for difficult conversations. "I do not want you to feel forced into this," Lucas said immediately. "Marriage is a serious commitment, and I will not have you trapped in another situation where you feel powerless." "I know you would not," Lydia replied. She watched the water flow, gathering her thoughts. "The irony is not lost on me that the solution to escaping one marriage is to enter another. We could find another way. We could keep fighting legally without marriage. But Blackwell said it would be difficult, and that detective could return at any time with legal authority to take me back." Lydia turned to face Lucas. "If I am being honest, the idea of marrying you does not frighten me the way it should. You have shown me nothing but kindness and respect. You have given me space to heal, never demanded anything from me." Lucas took her hands gently. "If we did this, it would be a real marriage in name, but we would go at your pace for everything else. Your own room, no expectations of intimacy until and unless you were ready. We would be partners, friends, building toward something more only if and when you felt comfortable." "That would not be fair to you," Lydia protested. "You deserve someone who can give you a real marriage, children, a proper family." "I want you," Lucas said simply. "However I can have you, on whatever terms make you feel safe. If that means we are married but live as friends for the rest of our lives, I would still choose that over not having you in my life at all." Lydia felt something crack open in her chest, a wall she had built around her heart beginning to crumble. "You really mean that? Every word?" Lucas cupped her face gently, giving her plenty of time to pull away. When she did not, he leaned in slowly and pressed the softest kiss to her forehead. "I love you, Lydia. Not who you might become when you are healed, not some idealized version of you. I love you exactly as you are right now, scars and fears and all." The tears came then, hot and healing. Lydia wrapped her arms around Lucas's waist and let herself cry into his chest, releasing months of pain and fear and loneliness. He held her through it all, steady and strong and safe. When she finally pulled back, her decision was made. "I want to marry you," she said. "Not just because it is the practical solution, but because I want to try. I want to see if I can learn to trust again, to love again. And if I am going to try with anyone, I want it to be you." Lucas's smile was radiant. "Are you sure?" "I am terrified," she admitted. "But yes, I am sure." They returned to the house to tell Mrs. Patterson, who was unsurprised and delighted. "About time you two figured out what everyone else could already see," she said, pulling them both into a hug. The next day, they met with Blackwell and made arrangements. They would marry quickly, within the week, to establish the legal protection as soon as possible. Lucas sent word to his sister Clara in Sacramento, though there was not time for her to travel for the ceremony. The wedding took place on a sunny Saturday morning at the small church in Weaverville. Lydia wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Patterson had altered to fit her, and she carried wildflowers that Lucas had picked at dawn. The ceremony was small, just Mrs. Patterson, Miguel, a few other ranch hands, and Blackwell as a witness. As Lydia stood beside Lucas and spoke her vows, she was surprised to realize she meant them. This might have started as a practical solution, but standing there with Lucas's hand warm in hers, she felt the first stirrings of something deeper. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas looked at her questioningly, asking silent permission. Lydia nodded, and he kissed her gently, chastely, a promise of patience rather than passion. The small gathering returned to the ranch for a celebratory meal that Mrs. Patterson had prepared. It was nothing like Lydia's first wedding, which had been a grand affair in St. Louis with hundreds of guests. This was intimate and genuine, surrounded by people who truly cared about her happiness. That night, Lucas showed Lydia to her room, the same one she had been occupying since her arrival. "Nothing has to change," he said softly. "This is still your space, your sanctuary. I am just down the hall if you need anything." But Lydia found herself reluctant to let him go. "Would you stay for a while, just to talk?" Lucas settled into the chair by the window while Lydia sat on the bed, and they talked late into the night about everything and nothing. Eventually, Lydia's eyes grew heavy and Lucas stood to leave. "Thank you," she said sleepily. "For everything. For saving me, for protecting me, for being patient." "You saved yourself," Lucas replied. "You were the one brave enough to leave, to travel across the country, to keep fighting. I just provided a safe place to land." After he left, Lydia lay in bed wearing her wedding ring, a simple gold band that Lucas had purchased in town. She turned it on her finger, marveling at how different this symbol felt from the one Richard had given her. That ring had been a chain. This one felt like a shield. 3 days after the wedding, Detective Simmons returned with the local sheriff. Lucas met them in the yard, flanked by Miguel and Thomas. "I have a warrant for the return of Lydia Danforth to her legal husband," Simmons announced triumphantly. "There is no Lydia Danforth here," Lucas said calmly. "My wife's name is Lydia Walker." The sheriff, a grizzled man named Tom Crawford, looked confused. "What are you talking about, Lucas? Lydia and I were married 5 days ago at the church in town. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony, and it is all properly registered. She is now a Walker, not a Danforth." Simmons's face turned purple with rage. "That marriage is invalid. She is already married. This is bigamy." According to California law, a woman who has been abandoned or abused by her husband can seek protection through legal marriage to another man, Blackwell said, stepping out of the house with papers in hand. "I have documentation of Mrs. Walker's previous marriage and the circumstances that led to her departure. I also have sworn statements from witnesses regarding her condition when she arrived in Weaverville, including a doctor's assessment of her injuries." The sheriff took the papers and reviewed them carefully. "This seems to be in order. Lucas, did you know she was married when you wed her?" "I knew she was fleeing an abusive situation," Lucas replied. "And I chose to offer her protection in the form of marriage. If that is a crime, then arrest me. But you are not taking my wife anywhere." Crawford sighed, rubbing his weathered face. "Simmons, this is way above my authority. If Danforth wants to challenge this marriage, he needs to do it through the courts, not by dragging a woman away against her will." "The law is on my side," Simmons protested. "Maybe, maybe not. That is for the judges to decide. But I am not removing a woman from her legal husband's home based on a warrant from another state that might not even be valid anymore." Crawford handed the papers back to Blackwell. "You tell Mr. Danforth that if he wants his wife back, he can come to California himself and make his case before a judge." Simmons looked like he wanted to argue further, but the sheriff's expression made it clear the matter was closed. The detective wheeled his horse around and galloped away, leaving dust and promises of retribution in his wake. After they left, Lucas sagged slightly with relief. Lydia, who had been watching from the window, rushed out to join him. "Is it really over?" she asked. "For now," Blackwell said. "But we should prepare for a legal challenge. Danforth strikes me as the type who does not like to lose, especially publicly." "Let him come," Lucas said, wrapping an arm around Lydia. "We will face it together." The weeks that followed were tense, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But as October turned to November, no word came from Richard or his detective. Blackwell returned to Sacramento, but promised to monitor the situation and alert them to any legal filings. During this time, Lydia and Lucas grew closer. They took daily walks together, shared meals, and talked for hours about their dreams and fears. Lydia found herself laughing again, something she had not done in years. Lucas showed her the ranch, taught her to ride a gentle mare named Daisy, and introduced her to the intricacies of cattle ranching. One cold November evening they sat by the fire in the parlor, Lydia working on mending while Lucas reviewed ranch accounts. It was domestic and peaceful, and Lydia realized with a start that she was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. "Lucas," she said softly. He looked up from his papers. "Yes. I want to thank you again. For everything you have done for me, for the life you have given me here." "You do not need to keep thanking me, Lydia. Being your husband, even in name only, has been a privilege." Lydia set down her mending and moved to sit beside him on the sofa. "What if I want it to be more than in name only?" Lucas went very still. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I trust you, that when I think about my future I cannot imagine it without you." She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I know I am still healing and there might be times when I struggle, but I want to try to have a real marriage with you, Lucas, in every way." Lucas cupped her face gently, searching her eyes. "Are you absolutely certain? I do not want you to feel rushed or obligated." "I am certain," Lydia said, and she was. The fear was still there, a whisper in the back of her mind, but it was overshadowed by trust and affection, and the growing love she felt for this patient, kind man. Lucas kissed her then, softly at first, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she did not, when she instead leaned into him, the kiss deepened. It was nothing like the rough, demanding kisses Richard had forced on her. This was tender and sweet, full of promise and care. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I love you so much, Lydia Walker." "I love you too," she whispered, and saying it out loud felt like breaking free from the last chain that bound her to her past. That night, Lydia moved her belongings into Lucas's room. They took things slowly, with Lucas following her lead every step of the way. He was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished. There were moments when old fears surfaced, when Lydia had to pause and breathe through the panic, but Lucas was there, holding her, reminding her that she was safe. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Lydia felt a profound sense of peace. She had been broken when she arrived in Weaverville, shattered into pieces by cruelty and violence. But Lucas had helped her put those pieces back together, not by fixing her but by giving her the space and support to heal herself. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, his hand gently stroking her hair. "How different this is from what I knew before. How you have shown me what love is supposed to feel like." Lucas pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You deserved that all along. I am just glad I get to be the one to give it to you." As autumn turned to winter, life at the W Ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lydia embraced her role as Lucas's wife and partner, working alongside Mrs. Patterson to manage the household and even taking an interest in the ranch operations. She had a good head for numbers and started helping Lucas with the books. In early December, a letter arrived from Blackwell. Richard Danforth had filed a legal challenge to the marriage in Missouri, but it held no weight in California courts. Furthermore, Blackwell had received word through his connections that Danforth had remarried just 3 weeks after Lydia's departure, to a young woman from a wealthy St. Louis family. This meant his claim to Lydia was legally dubious at best. "He remarried," Lydia said, reading the letter with disbelief. "He married someone else while supposedly searching for me." "Which means he was never really looking to bring you back," Lucas said. "He just wanted to control you to punish you for leaving." "But now he cannot touch me," Lydia said slowly, the realization dawning. "If he is remarried, he cannot claim I am his wife." "Exactly. Blackwell says we should file a countersuit seeking to have your first marriage officially annulled based on abandonment and his subsequent remarriage." It should go through without issue. Lydia felt tears of relief streaming down her face. It is really over. He cannot hurt me anymore. Lucas pulled her into his arms. You are free, Lydia, truly free. The annulment came through in February of 1877, and Lydia felt like she could finally breathe fully for the first time in years. She and Lucas celebrated quietly, just the two of them riding out to their spot by the creek. What do you want to do now that you are free? Lucas asked as they sat on the creek bank. I am already doing it, Lydia replied, leaning against him. Building a life here with you, being part of something good and honest. I was thinking, Lucas said carefully. Clara keeps asking when we are going to visit. I thought maybe in the spring we could take a trip to Sacramento. You could meet her and Jonathan properly, see the city. Lydia smiled. I would like that. I want to know the people who are important to you. As spring arrived, the ranch came alive with new growth and new beginnings. Lydia discovered she was pregnant in late April, and the joy on Lucas's face when she told him was something she would treasure forever. A baby, he said wonderingly, his hand gently resting on her still flat stomach. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy? Lydia asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy does not even begin to cover it, Lucas said, pulling her close. You have given me so much, Lydia. A real partnership, love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive. They made the trip to Sacramento in May, and Lydia immediately adored Clara, who was warm and welcoming. Clara's husband Jonathan was equally kind, and the two couples spent a wonderful week together, sharing stories and making plans for the future. I am so glad my brother found you, Clara said one afternoon, as she and Lydia walked through Sacramento's bustling streets. After our father died, I worried Lucas would throw himself into the ranch and forget to build a life for himself. But you have made him happier than I have ever seen him. He saved me, Lydia said simply. In every way a person can be saved. From what he has told me, you saved each other, Clara replied with a knowing smile. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Lucas was attentive without being overbearing, making sure Lydia rested when she needed to but never treating her like she was fragile. Mrs. Patterson fussed over her like a mother hen, preparing special foods and knitting tiny clothes for the coming baby. Their son was born on a snowy December evening, arriving healthy and loud into the world. Lucas wept openly when he held him for the first time, marveling at the tiny perfection of his features. What should we name him? Lydia asked, exhausted but radiant. Lucas looked down at the baby, then up at his wife with love shining in his eyes. What about James after my father? James Lucas Walker. It is perfect, Lydia agreed. Little James grew quickly, his arrival bringing even more joy and laughter to the household. Lucas was a devoted father, often found walking the floors with his son at night or making silly faces to earn a smile. Watching him with their child, Lydia fell even more deeply in love with her husband. On their second wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Lydia with a picnic by the creek, their special spot. Mrs. Patterson had agreed to watch James for the afternoon, giving them rare time alone. I have been thinking about how much my life has changed since you stepped off that stage coach, Lucas said as they lay on a blanket, watching clouds drift across the blue sky. I was content before, but I did not know what I was missing until I found it. I was dead inside when I arrived, Lydia replied. Just going through the motions of survival, you showed me how to live again, how to trust, how to love. Lucas rolled onto his side to look at her. Do you ever regret it, marrying me, binding your life to mine? Never, Lydia said firmly. Not for a single moment. You are the best man I have ever known, Lucas Walker. You are patient and kind and strong. You are an incredible husband and an amazing father. Every day with you is a gift I never thought I would receive." They kissed as the creek burbled beside them, the California sun warm on their faces, and Lydia marveled at the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived in Weaverville broken and afraid, barely holding on to hope. But Lucas had seen past the damage to the woman underneath, had given her space to heal while offering steady support and unconditional love. Their life together continued to unfold beautifully. A daughter, Mary, joined their family 2 years after James, followed by another son, Thomas, 2 years after that. The ranch prospered under Lucas and Lydia's joint management, with Lydia's business sense complementing Lucas's ranching expertise. They expanded the operation to include the horse breeding program Lucas had always dreamed of, and it became quite successful. Mrs. Patterson remained with them, becoming a beloved grandmother figure to the children. She eventually retired from heavy housework, but stayed on as part of the family, spending her days teaching the grandchildren to bake and telling them stories. As the years passed, Lydia never forgot where she had come from or how far she had traveled to find peace. She quietly helped other women in difficult situations, offering sanctuary at the ranch or connecting them with resources through Blackwell's legal network. It became her mission to ensure that other women running from violence had the same chance at a new life that she had been given. Lucas supported her fully in this work, even as some in the community criticized them for interfering in marital matters. But the Walkers had built a reputation as fair, honest people, and their standing in Weaverville remained strong. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas arranged for Clara and Jonathan to visit, along with their 3 children. The ranch house was full of laughter and chaos as the cousins ran wild together, and the adults sat on the porch watching the sunset over the valley. "You two have built something really special here," Jonathan observed. "Not just the ranch, but the family, the community you have created." "It was not always easy," Lucas admitted, his arm around Lydia's shoulders, "but the best things rarely are." Lydia looked at the life spread out before her, her husband, her children, her extended family, the land she had come to love. It was more than she had ever dared to dream of during those dark days in St. Louis. "I used to think my life was over when I left Missouri," she said softly. "I thought I was running toward nothing, just away from pain, but I was actually running toward everything that mattered, toward home." Lucas kissed her temple. "And I was waiting here, not knowing what I was waiting for until you arrived." That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Lydia and Lucas lay in their room, talking as they always did before sleep. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not stopped to help me that day?" Lydia asked. "All the time," Lucas admitted. "And it terrifies me. Not knowing you, not having this life with you, it would have been a half-lived existence." "I think we were meant to find each other," Lydia said. "2 broken pieces that fit together perfectly." "You were never broken," Lucas insisted, as he always did. "Bruised, bent, hurt, yes, but never broken. You just needed the time and space to remember your own strength." Lydia smiled in the darkness. After all these years, Lucas still had the ability to make her feel valued and whole. His patience had never wavered, his love had never faltered, and he had shown her through thousands of small actions that she was cherished. As she drifted off to sleep in the safety of his arms, Lydia thought about the terrified woman who had stepped off that stagecoach 12 years ago. If she could tell that woman anything, it would be that the fear was worth pushing through, that the risk of trusting again would lead to rewards beyond imagination. She had arrived broken and afraid, but Lucas had healed her with patience and love, not by fixing what was damaged, but by creating a space where she could heal herself. Together, they had built a life filled with love, laughter, and purpose. The Double W Ranch thrived for decades under their care. James eventually took over the ranching operations, while Mary became a teacher in Weaverville, and Thomas studied law in Sacramento, inspired by the Blackwell family's legacy. All three children grew up knowing they were deeply loved, watching their parents' relationship as a model of what marriage should be: partnership, respect, affection, and unwavering support. Lucas and Lydia grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They never took for granted the miracle of having found each other, and they made sure to tell each other and their children every day how much they were loved. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. All three children were there with their spouses and children. Clara and Jonathan made the trip from Sacramento, and half of Weaverville turned out to honor the couple who had become pillars of their community. Lydia, now 72 but still sharp and active, stood beside Lucas as their grandson made a toast. She looked at her husband, his hair now silver but his gray eyes still as warm and loving as the day they had met, and felt her heart swell with gratitude. After the party, when everyone had finally gone home or to bed, Lucas and Lydia walked slowly down to the creek, their special place. The path was well worn now, traveled countless times over 50 years of marriage. 50 years, Lydia said wonderingly. When I think of that terrified girl who arrived here, I can barely recognize her. I can, Lucas said. She is still there in your eyes sometimes, in your fierce protection of anyone who is hurting. But she is surrounded now by the strong, confident woman who built a life and a family from nothing but courage and determination. They sat on the bench Lucas had built years ago, replacing the blankets they had once spread on the ground. The creek still bubbled beside them, constant and soothing. "I love you, Lucas Walker," Lydia said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "You gave me everything when I had nothing. You showed me what it meant to be truly cherished. And you gave me purpose," Lucas replied, taking her hand. "Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me what it meant to really live, to love with my whole heart." They sat together as the sun set over the California hills, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of pain. The ranch would continue for generations, a testament to their hard work and dedication. But their true legacy was the love they had shared, the family they had raised, and the example they had set of what patience, kindness, and unwavering support could achieve. Lydia rested her head on Lucas's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home, not just in the physical space of the ranch, but in the man beside her who had healed her wounds with gentle hands and a patient heart. The Wild West had a reputation for being harsh and unforgiving, and in many ways it was. But it had also been the place where Lydia Danforth had transformed into Lydia Walker, where she had learned to trust again, to love again, and to believe in happy endings. She had arrived broken and afraid, and Lucas had healed her with patience and love. Together, they had created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. A family built on respect, a ranch run with integrity, and a love story that proved even the deepest wounds could heal with time and tenderness. As darkness fell and the stars emerged overhead, Lucas helped Lydia to her feet, and they walked back to the house hand in hand, their steps slower now but no less certain. Inside, they could see lights glowing warm and welcoming, their children and grandchildren creating memories that would last lifetimes. It was not the ending Lydia had imagined all those years ago when she fled St. Louis in terror. It was infinitely better. A life full of love, purpose, and the deep satisfaction of knowing she was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the right person. The ranch would see many more sunrises, many more generations of walkers carrying on the traditions Lucas and Lydia had established. But the foundation would always be the love story of two people who found each other when they needed it most, who built something lasting from broken pieces, and who proved that with patience, kindness, and unwavering commitment, any wound could heal and any heart could learn to trust again. Lucas and Lydia Walker lived out their days in the home they had built together, surrounded by family and the land they loved. When they eventually passed, just months apart after 53 years of marriage, the entire town of Weaverville mourned the loss of two people who had shown everyone what true partnership looked like. Their children continued the ranch, passing down not just property but values. The importance of helping those in need, the power of patience and understanding, and the knowledge that love, real love, was built not in grand gestures but in thousands of small kindnesses over a lifetime. The story of the rancher who healed a broken, frightened woman with patience and love became part of Weaverville's history, told and retold as an example of the good that could flourish even in the rough and tumble world of the Wild West. It reminded people that strength came in many forms, that healing was possible, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was accept help and allow themselves to be loved. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy Lucas and Lydia left behind. Proof that love, real and true and patient, could heal even the deepest wounds and create something beautiful that would last for generations.